Texas State Athletic Trainers Association's purpose
is to promote, enhance, and advance
the athletic training profession
in Texas.
In Texas.
In Texas.
Hi, I'm Al Wilson, athletic trainer at Killeen High School. I started in 1961. Another about that time, flash hit, and nobody was hit by lightning, but boy, I mean, we didn't have to tell them to get off that field. Everybody laughs about my coaching experiences. I had a perfect record. We played 5 junior high football games and never scored a point. So I had a perfect record.
The godfather of athletic trainers in Texas was a terrible coach. But that's kind of the point. Back in 1961, Al Wilson was an assistant coach, not an athletic trainer, which he should have been.
When I came, there was very few high school athletic trainers in the whole state of Texas. And they said, well, let's just call him Doc. Come to find out, it's just like the coaches. When the coaches go to coaching school, hey coach, hey coach, hey coach, and everybody turns their head. Well, we're Doc, and everybody calls us that all over the state of Texas.
Al Wilson's transition from coach to doc happened early in his career.
We did not have lightning detectors. It was
common sense.
Common sense.
10 years in, Texas began licensing athletic trainers in 1971.
And you talk about 50 years, what a milestone that we've made it 50 years as a licensed profession.
My number is 0113. It was interesting because the last meeting I went to some years ago, the little girl signing me in just kept looking down and looking up and looking down and looking up and said, "You're one of those original guys, aren't you?" And I said, "Yeah, and I'm still standing here signing in."
There's over 8,000 numbers. My license number is number 120, and that tells you something about my experience level. You'd put it over the sock, and then use what we called back in the day was the Louisiana heel wrap.
No, there's no 001. 101. They added 100 because there didn't want to be one.
You know, when I got into the profession in 1974, you know, we used the modalities and the techniques that we were taught and were efficient at the time. You remember this?
I do remember that. In fact, I still have one of these.
But as I grew in the profession, things changed enormously. You know, there were modalities that I used that weren't even invented in 1974.
This is a little holster I got when I was a sophomore in high school, and had a little tape ring on it, wore it on your belt, your scissors. These loops are for AM caps, you know, ammonia capsules, which we used to use rather liberally in those days with concussions, which we don't do anymore now.
50 years ago, athletic trainers began being properly recognized for their work through licensure, but that didn't immediately promote them from their position of assistant coaches. The evolution of the profession has been more about the way outsiders perceive it than how athletic trainers perceive themselves and their work.
When I moved to Austin, the pay was not anywhere near what it is now. We didn't have a budget. There was still a lot of the rub a little dirt on it type stuff. There was a lot of that still going on. And over the years, especially in the state of Texas, I really think Texas is still a leader in the athletic training profession.
When I graduated, it was largely a male-dominated profession. And our statistics now are I want to say 55–60% women. And if you look at student population, it's even higher than that.
When I got into this profession, I never would have dreamed that there would be females standing on the sidelines of the Super Bowl.
If I could make it like one key word that I feel like has changed in my 22 years, it's the word respect. The value now that's being placed on the services provided by athletic trainers, I think, has changed tremendously. And I think that is all due to the hard work and efforts of all of the licensed athletic trainers in the state of Texas.
Well, I taped my first ankle in 6th grade. I'll tell a brief story in regards to it. My 2nd grade teacher is the one that got me into it.
The teacher was having trouble getting him to read, and she wanted to motivate him.
She needed something to motivate me, so she went and bought one of those plastic doctor's kits and gave it to Dad or told Dad to fill it up with some supplies. And I put Band-Aids on everybody at recess. You know, that was my first job in 2nd grade.
The basic job of an athletic trainer certainly is that one-on-one with the athlete. And we need to never forget that. You know, we can get all this technology and all the fancy machines, but we never need to forget it's that one-on-one with the athlete.
You treat that youngster like it was your child, knowing what you know as an athletic trainer. Whether you put them back on through, put them back on through so you never go wrong. Treat them like they were your kids and how you expect your kids to be treated. And I've never deviated from that.
It has been a wonderful journey seeing what has happened in our profession, and Texas has been, in many instances, has been in the forefront of making things happen in our profession, raising the bar.
The passion that individual athletic trainers in Texas felt for helping individuals turned into a group effort to help Texas athletes with the formation of the TSATA in 2001.
But some of them weren't that good, because if it was going to be the Texas Athletic Trainers Association, you know, we're going to be called TATA. And so
the Texas State Athletic Trainers Association's purpose
is to promote, enhance, and advance
the athletic training profession in Texas.
In Texas.
In Texas.
Texas. It seems obvious now, but 20 years ago, Texas didn't have its own athletic trainers association. It was also obvious to Texas lawmakers.
The chair of the Public Health Committee actually said that he wasn't concerned about any organization that represented Texas and Arkansas. This was the Texas legislature, and they were only concerned with issues that affected the citizens of Texas.
At the first meeting that we had in Austin, June of 2001, that in that meeting there were a lot of big things that came in, not the hiring of me, but the vision that that board had.
I grew up, my father was a state official here, so I clearly understood the importance of actually going to Austin and meeting with your state representative and your senator.
It's become an organization that the licensed athletic trainer in Pecos, Texas, in Lubbock, Texas, and Dallas, and San Angelo can be a member of and have an equal voice in.
We had to have a voice for the athletic trainers in the state of Texas that could come to the state legislature and present the areas of need that affected the athletic health care for the citizens of Texas.
Since its formation 20 years ago, the TSATA has led the state and sometimes the nation with health and safety initiatives. 2007 was a big year for safety. Thanks to the efforts of the TSATA, the state legislature passed Senate Bills 7 and 82, and both had a significant impact on the safety of student athletes in Texas.
The 3 terms that I served, first as a regional rep and then as the chair, we passed 3 very significant legislative. One was Senate Bill 7, which was the AED bill. There had to be an AED at all practices and at games.
The greatest accomplishment there is that it's become an expectation, right? And so now schools, fans, the general public, when you walk into a school district facility, the expectation is that there's an AED and there's a sign posted. And what's happened is it's not just one, it's multiple.
As an athletic trainer in rural West Texas, and I go to a lot of 6-man games. Some of the schools that I've covered, the school is the only building in that community. There have been countless stories of athletic trainers saving lives because of the availability of having an AED present.
We passed Senate Bill 82, which was a vast safety legislation. Included everything from asthma inhalers had to be readily available. There was part of the legislation that had to be, when there are games and practices going on, you had to have clearly marked emergency lanes had to be open. And I think that part of that bill was that all students had to have CPR. I think that came out of that bill.
TSATA, with the help of the AED bill, the concussion bill, things of that nature, TSATA has really helped get those bills passed. AED, I am so glad that we have that now, and I'm so glad that it's a bill that says that every campus has to have one. There has not only been athletes or our patients that we've saved, there's also been fans in the stands that some of my colleagues have saved.
In addition to those 2007 safety bills, the TSATA also persuaded the Texas Education Association to approve a sports medicine course taught by certified athletic trainers.
In 2006, the Texas Education Agency approached Spanky Stevens and our lobbyist with the idea of the TSATA taking on the courses that teach sports medicine in the state of Texas.
The sports medicine classes are being taught all over the state, and every 3 years there's 80, 90 school districts that have to send in their thing. They say they have stacks and stacks of papers. What we would like for you to do is to develop a program, a sports medicine program, that can be taught in the school districts.
But along came the idea of the sports medicine class, and that was another thing that has saved a lot of athletic trainers' jobs, because athletic trainers, through the work of Dennis Hart and his group, put together a sports medicine class and got approved by TEA, and TEA allowed it to be I'm not what the proper term is, but allowed it to be a class that athletic trainers could teach if they had a license, and they would not need a teaching certificate.
And that's been a huge thing that promotes athletic training to high school students. And we think that obviously that's a great benefit for us, because starting that interest in athletic training at the high school level will end up giving us the leaders of the future.
It saved our TSATA because we had $800 in the bank before that class.
We believe that the implementation of the sports medicine courses not only provided students this great opportunity, and it also gave the athletic trainers the opportunity to teach what they were experts in.
Mesquite, Texas.
Meanwhile, in Mesquite, Bucky Taylor's research on concussions led to his school district implementing a return to play policy that no one else was doing.
I went to our athletic director, our team doctors, and they thought it was solid. It was good medicine, and the athletic director and I took it to the school board, and the school board thought it was a good, and we established the first concussion protocol in the state of Texas, and maybe the first high school protocol in the nation.
At about the same time, the effects of concussions on NFL players was a big topic, so big that Dan Rather from 60 Minutes interviewed Bucky about his work in Mesquite.
And that first concussion that he had was when he was a freshman at Mesquite High School.
Was that case of sort of a light bulb went off?
Absolutely.
Emboldened by the national attention, Bucky and the TSATA began lobbying state lawmakers, eventually resulting in Natasha's Law, passed in 2011.
You know, I got with Dennis Hart, and we figured that this was a starting point, especially after the Dan Rather interview, that we had some impotence there, and we needed to get a group of folks together and try to bring about a law in the state of Texas.
Being able to advocate and to push through legislation that is truly benefiting the student athlete, mostly in secondary school, but not only. Natasha's Law is any high school or college athlete who has suffered a concussion. So the TSATA has had an incredible impact on protecting the lives of athletes, especially throughout the state of Texas.
House Bill 2038, Natasha's Law, not only protected kids, but it protected coaches, because coaches were making medical decisions about a head injury that there is no way that they're trained for. There's no telling how many coaches we protected through the passage of the law from making a decision, sending a kid back into a game that should not be sent back into the game, that should be sent to the doctor and should be evaluated, and getting away from the idea, well, it's just, you know, he just got his bell rung. Well, it's a whole lot more than that. A little bit about concussion, a little bit about the law.
We are proud of Mesquite because of Bucky Taylor's great work in researching the actual materials that brought to light the need for concussion recognition and management. We were ahead of the NFL in how we approached the management of concussion. And so with Bucky's history there and his good work, which we'd already had a bill in place in Mesquite ISD.
Currently, the TSATA is working hard to update its Practice Act, which provides guidance and leadership for what athletic trainers can do. The scope of TSATA athletic trainers has expanded quite a bit in 20 years.
So there was no way I was getting rid of this. You know, I got to keep a hold of this. You know, just because somebody like Mark will call up and say that they need it, or Dennis or Bucky will call up and say, hey, you got some of that snake skin? As we move as a profession outside of the field house and into multiple areas in the doctor's offices, into industrial settings, you know, where we are all finding out an athletic trainer is a valuable asset.
We've seen over the years athletic trainers moving into public safety. We've seen athletic trainers moving into things like NASA, aerospace, but I think one of the great places for athletic trainers to continue to accelerate is within the educational system framework.
Texas was the first state to have a Practice Act across the country. And again, when our Practice Act was written, we were largely working with athletes. Being able to expand our Practice Act to, say, activity, and there are other changes as well, but to me the most important is identifying our skill set as someone who works with activity-related injuries and not necessarily athletically related injuries.
Navy SEALs, the Special Forces, NASA, on and on, you know, Homeland Security. You know, the Marines trained 40 athletic trainers to be a group to be sent out in the Marine Corps.
Lackland Air Force Base in San Antonio has embraced the expertise athletic trainers can bring.
So we're not trying to get an athlete ready for a Friday game day. We are preparing them for the long term.
Jerry GREESON worked most of his career at UT San Antonio, but now contracts at the base.
The main thing about this is we've learned that we can step outside of the traditional setting. Whoever that first person was who decided, I don't have to work in the high school or the college and go off and work in an industry, to go work at NASCAR, to go work at NASA, to go work at the military. And that's where all athletic trainers are. They were to me, a set of pioneers that we can never thank enough.
Jerry has been with Lackland since 2019. In some ways, it's the same work he's always done. In other ways, it's a lot different.
I've had sergeants and majors tell me this. They said, Jerry, you need to remember something. You're working with a lot of airmen. Some of these guys won't come back. Some of these guys won't survive. It just reminded me that, golly, we're really doing something big here. And sometimes we take this for granted.
In the spring of 2020, when COVID-19 shut the country down, athletic trainers stepped up. Houston Methodist Sugar Land brought in about 20 ATs to assist, and the medical professionals there quickly realized they were being assisted by medical professionals.
It took a little bit of convincing. A few of the folks thought it might have been a little bit out of our scope, but if you look at our licensure law and so on, we work under the direction of a physician. If the physician gives you a directive and that physician feels as though you're capable of handling that direction, we can step in and do it.
It's been nearly 2 years since the pandemic began, making it hard to remember how scary it was back in the spring of 2020. As Houston Methodist Sugar Land's ICU began filling up, at a time when there were still more questions than answers, athletic trainers were there.
The ICU personnel, the nurses, the respiratory therapists, the physicians, they were drowning because we had so many patients that they were behind the 8 ball day in and day out, and patient care was actually at risk. So the perception amongst people, once they see the abilities of what an athletic trainer can do, completely changes from the misconception of being a glorified coach. We're not coaches, we're medical professionals.
The profession has come a long way since 1971 and has gone through enormous changes, both internally when it comes to things like equipment and modalities, and externally in regards to perception from coaches and the general public. What hasn't changed is what kind of people are drawn to this profession.
We kind of called that snakeskin. It's kind of a real thin, plastic-coated silicone gauze, but it had no stretch to it. But it sure beat taping directly to the skin.
At the end of the day, athletic trainers want to help people. Bottom line.
I just know that this was a calling for me. This is what I was supposed to do.
I tell the young athletic trainers who are studying going to the profession, it's not a job, it's not a career, it's a lifestyle.
The day that I can't have fun with the kids is the day that I throw my keys on the desk and say I'm done.
I think anytime you selfishly draw from something and don't put back into something, you're going to lose. And I think it's very, very important that people take time out of their lives and serve to make it better for the people that are following us. And I think we've done that.
In 2001, our dues were $50 a year. And this coming 2021, our dues are $50 a year. We're not in it to make money. We're in it to serve our profession, and we can't ever lose sight of that.
It was a long ride, but it was a ride worthwhile.